Book 4 of Metaphysics by Aristotle, Chapter 1. That is called a principle from whence anything has had motion imparted to it in the first instance. For example, the principle of length and of a way. From hence, indeed, is the actual principle, but from the contrary a different one. But again, that is called a first principle from whence each thing would spring in the most beautiful manner. As, for instance, even in the case of discipline, the beginning must be made sometimes not from what is first and the principle of a thing, but from whence one may learn with the greatest facility. And again, that is a principle from whence is produced the first of a thing that is inherent, as, for example, a keel of a vessel and a foundation of a house. And some suppose the heart of animals to be a thing of this sort, but others the brain, and others whatever else of this kind they may happen with. And again, that is a principle from whence the first of a thing not inherent is produced, and whence motion and change have first been naturally fitted to commence, as, for example, the child from the father and the mother, and the battle from abuse. And that is a first principle according to the free impulse of which things in motion are moved, and things undergoing a change are changed, as in cities, dominions and dynasties, and kingdoms and tyrannies are styled principles, and both the arts, and especially those of them that are architectonic, are called principles. Further, whence a thing is known first, this is called a principle of that thing. As, for example, the hypotheses are principles of demonstration, in as many ways also as first principles are styled, are causes in like manner denominated, for all causes are first principles. Common to all first principles is the being the original from whence a thing either is, or is produced, or is known. But of these principles some indeed are inherent, and others are extrinsic. Wherefore, nature constitutes both a first principle, and an element is so likewise, and understanding, and free will, and substance, and the final cause. For in the case of many things, the principle of knowledge and of motion is the good and the fair. Chapter 2. In one way, that is called cause, from which, as inherent, anything is produced, as, for example, the brass of a statue, and the silver of a cup, and the genera of these. But in another way, the form and exemplar are regarded as causes, and this is the reason of the formal cause, and the genera of these. As, for instance, in the diapason, the cause is the ratio of 2 to 1, and in general, number and the parts, those that are in the ratio, belong to this order of cause. But further, that constitutes a cause from whence is the first principle of change or of rest, as, for instance, the designing cause, and the father of a child, and, generally speaking, the forming of that which is being formed, and that capable of effecting a change of that which is undergoing a change. Further, a cause is as the end. This, however, is the final cause, as, for instance, health of walking. For why does one walk? We say that he may have good health, and, saying so, we think that we have assigned the cause. And as many operations, doubtless, as take place between any other source of motion and the end are regarded as causes. For example, of health tenuity, or purging, or medicines, or instruments, for all these are on account of the end. But they differ from one another in respect of being, some as instruments, and others as things done. Causes indeed, therefore, are enumerated almost somehow after this manner. And seeing that causes are thus multifariously denominated, it happens that many of them are causes of the same thing, not according to accident. For instance, of the statue, both the statuary art and the brass, not according to anything that is different, but so far forth as it is a statue. This, however, does not take place in the same manner, but the brass is as matter, and the art as the origin of motion, or the efficient cause. And some things are reciprocally causes of one another, as, for example, labour of a good habit of body, and this latter again of labour, yet not in the same manner, but the one is as the end, and the other as the principle of motion. Further, the same thing sometimes is the cause of things that are contrary, for that which when present is the cause of this particular thing, this when absent we sometimes denominate the cause of the contrary. For example, the absence of the pilot is the cause of the capsizing of the boat, the presence of whom is the cause of its preservation. Both, however, as well the presence as the absence of the pilot are as efficient causes, that is, causes imparting motion. Now, all the causes just enumerated fall under 4 modes, the most evident. For indeed, the elements of syllables, and the matter of things constructed by art, and the fire and earth, and all such bodies, and the parts of a whole, and the hypotheses of the conclusion, are causes, as that whereof other things are produced. But of these, some are as the subject, as, for instance, the parts, but others as the formal cause, for example, both the whole, and the composition, and the form. But the seed, and the physician, and the deliberator, and in short, the maker, all are the causes of the principle of change or of stability. But the rest, as the end and the good, are causes of other things. For the final cause aims at being the best, and an end to the other things. Let there be, however, no actual difference in saying a thing is good or appears good. These causes, indeed, therefore, are so many in species, but the modes of causes are, doubtless, many in number. These, however, become less numerous by being reduced under heads. For causes are called so in many ways, and of those things of the same species, antecedently and subsequently, one thing is the cause of another, as, for example, of health the physician and the artisan, and of the diapason the double and number, and always those things that comprise anything whatsoever of singulars. But, moreover, cause is denominated as the accident and the genera of these, as, for instance, of a statue in one sense Polyclitus is the cause, and in another the statuary, because it is accidental with the statuary to be Polyclitus. And the things embracing the accidental are causes. For instance, man is a cause of a statue, or also, in general, animal, because Polyclitus is a man, and man is an animal. But also of the accidents one is more remote, and another more contiguous than others. For example, just as if the white and the musical should be termed a cause of the statue, but not merely Polyclitus, or man. But besides all things, both these that are denominated appropriately or strictly, and those according to accident, some causes are denominated as things endued with a capacity, but others as things energizing, as the cause of the house being built is the builder, or the builder considered as in the act of building. In like manner, with what has been stated will be mentioned also the causes in the case of which there are causes, as, for example, of this statue, as far forth as it is a statue, or in general of an image, or of this brass, so far forth as it is brass, or in short, matter, and in the case of the accidents it is so in like manner. Further also, these and those shall be predicated as connected together, as, for example, not Polyclitus, nor a statuary, but Polyclitus a statuary. But, however, all these at least are 6 in number, yet are expressed in a twofold manner. For either as a singular are they denominated, or as the genus thereof, or as the accident, or as genus of the accident, or as these connected together, or simply expressed. Further, all of them as energizing, or according to capacity. But thus far is there a difference that causes energizing and singulars, and those of which they are the causes subsist at the same time and at the same time cease to be, as, for example, the person healing with that person that is being restored to health, and this person the builder with that which is being built. Not invariably, however, is this the case with regard to causes in capacity, for not at the same time sink into decay the house and the builder. Chapter 3. An element is called that from which, as an inherent first principle and indivisible in species, something is compounded into a different species. As, for instance, the elements of voice are those things of which the voice is composed, and into which it is ultimately divided. Those elements, however, no longer are divided into other voices, different from them in species. But even though they be divided, the parts would be of the same species, as, for example, the portion of water is water, but a portion of the syllable is not a syllable. In like manner also do the old philosophers who enumerate the elements of bodies say that they are those entities into which bodies are ultimately divided. But those no longer are divisible into others different in species. And whether such may be one or many, these they yet call elements. Similarly also are denominated the elements both of diagrams and, in general, those of demonstrations. For the primary demonstrations, and those that are inherent in many more demonstrations, themselves are styled elements of demonstrations. But of such kind are the first syllogisms, which are composed of 3 terms by means of the one middle. And, by a transference of the meaning, they hence call an element that which, being one and small, may be useful for many purposes. Wherefore also, what is small and simple and indivisible is styled an element. Hence it has come to pass that those things which are most especially universal are elements, because each of them is one and simple, and is inherent in many things, or in all, or in as many as possible. And to some speculators it seems that the one and the point are first principles. Since, therefore, those things called genera are universal and indivisible, for there is one definition of them, certain persons call the genera elements, and that, too, in preference to difference. For the genus is more universal, for in whatsoever the difference resides, the genus also follows. But in what the genus resides does not, in every way, constitute the difference. Common, however, to all is the characteristic that the being of the element of each body is the first inherent quality in each. Chapter 4. Nature is called, in one way, the production of things that are by nature. As, for instance, if one putting forth his voice should articulate the letter U, and in another, as that from which, as being inherent, that which is being naturally produced is primarily formed. Moreover, nature is the origin of the earliest motion in each of the things in itself subsisting by nature, so far as it is this very thing. Now, those things are said to be produced by nature, as many as involve growth through another body by means of contact, and growth along with, or growth beside, just as embryos. But the being connascent differs from contact, for in the latter there must needs be nothing else besides the touch. But in things that are connate there is some one thing that is the same in both, which, instead of involving contact, causes them to be connascent, and causes them to be one according to what is continuous, and involving quantity, but not according to quality. Moreover is that styled nature from which, as its primary matter, there either is or arises anything of the things that subsist by nature, being without regular motion, and unchangeable from the power which belongs to itself. For instance, of a statue, or of brazen vessels, the brass is called the nature, and of wooden vessels the wood. But in like manner is it in the case of the rest, for each thing is from these the primary matter remaining in a state of conservation. For in this way also do they affirm the elements of those things that are by nature to constitute nature, some saying that this is fire, but others earth, and others air, and others water, but others asserting some other such thing, and others some of these, but others all of them. In another way, however, nature is styled the substance of things that exist by nature. For instance, those who affirm that nature is the earliest synthesis, as Empedocles says that, quote, nature is there of no one of entities, but merely mixture and of things mixed, a change, and thus by men is nature styled. Close quote. Wherefore, as many things also as by nature exist, or are produced, that being in existence already, from which it is natural that they should arise, or should have their being, not as yet do we say that such is in possession of nature, unless they have the species and the form. By nature, then, subsists that which is composed from both of these, as, for instance, animals and their parts. Nature, however, constitutes the primary matter, and this in a twofold sense, either the primary in reference to a thing itself, or upon the whole the first. For example, of brazen works, the first in reference to these is the brass, and water perhaps, in general, if the primary matter of all things that are capable of being liquefied be water. And nature constitutes both species and substance, and this is the end of production. But now, metaphorically speaking, and generally, every substance is called nature for this reason, because nature also is a certain substance. Doubtless, from the things that have been stated, the earliest nature, and that termed so with precision, is the substance. I mean of those things possessing the principle of motion in themselves, so far forth as themselves are such. For matter, in respect of its being susceptible of this, is styled nature, and generations and the act of production are termed so in consequence of their motions being from this. And the first principle of motion in those things that by nature subsist is nature, inherent as a first principle in a manner, either potentially or actually. Chapter 5. Necessary is defined that without which, as a cooperating cause, it is not admissible for a thing to exist. As, for instance, respiration and nourishment are necessary conditions for an animal, for without these it is impossible that an animal can exist, and that is necessary without which it is not possible for what is good either to subsist, or to arise, or to cast aside any evil, or that any evil should be exterminated. For instance, the drinking a certain medicine is a necessary precaution against sickness, and the sailing to Aegina against the loss of one's property. Further, the compulsory and compulsion are styled necessary, but this is that which constitutes an obstruction, and is capable of offering an hindrance to impulse and free will. For what is compulsory is styled necessary, wherefore also is it a thing that is sad, as also Evenus has it, quote, for everything necessary is a thing doleful. Close quote. And force, or compulsion, involves a certain necessity, as also Sophocles says, quote, but force compels me to do these things. Close quote. And necessity seems to be a something that is inevitable, correctly so, for it is contrary to the motion that results according to free will, and according to the power of reasoning. Further, that which does not admit of being otherwise than it is, we say is in this way disposed as a necessary thing. And according to this acceptation of the word, what is necessary, and all the other things that are so, are also in a manner styled necessary. For the violent or compulsory is called necessary, either in regard of action or passion, at such times as when a person cannot make any move according to impulse on account of some constraining cause, so that this is a necessary impulse on account of which the thing could not be otherwise. And in the case of the cooperating causes of the principle of vitality and the good, it is so in like manner. For when it is not admissible, on the one hand, to obtain indeed the good, and on the other to live and to exist without certain things, these things then are necessary, and this cause constitutes a certain necessity. Further does demonstration belong to those things that are necessary, because it is not possible that the things that are being demonstrated should be otherwise, if the thing be absolutely demonstrated. But causes of this are things primary, which it is impossible should subsist otherwise than they do, out of which is formed the syllogism. Of some things truly is there a different cause from themselves of their being necessary, but of others there is no such cause, but on account of these are other things that are from necessity. Wherefore, what is primary and what is absolute or simple are strictly necessary, for it is not possible that this can be disposed in many ways. Therefore, neither can it subsist in different ways at different times, for on such a supposition would it now be disposed in many ways. If, therefore, there are certain things that are eternal and immovable, there is in them nothing compulsory or contrary to nature. Chapter 6. One is called that which subsists as such according to accident in one way, and in another that which subsists essentially. A thing is called one according to accident, for instance, choriscus, and what is musical, and the musical choriscus. For it is one and the same thing to say choriscus, and what is musical, as to say choriscus the musician. Also, to say the musical and the just is one with saying the just musician choriscus. For all these are called one according to accident, the just indeed, and the musical, because they are accidents in one substance, but what is musical and choriscus, because either is an accident in the other. Likewise also, in a certain sense, the musical choriscus is one with choriscus, because either of the parts of those that are in this sentence is an accident in the other, as, for example, what is musical in choriscus, and the musical choriscus in just choriscus, because one portion of either is an accident in the same one. For there is no difference whether what is musical is an accident in choriscus, or choriscus the just in the musical choriscus. In like manner, however, will one be denominated according to accident, though it should be predicated of the genus, or of some universal names, as, for instance, if man were said to be the same with a musical man. For that it should be so, either because the musical is an accident in the man being one substance, or because both are accidents in any one of those which are singulars, as in choriscus. Nevertheless, both are not inherent in the same manner, but the one perhaps as genus, and in the substance, and the other as a habit or passion of the substance. Therefore, as many things as are expressed according to accident are styled one after this manner. But of things denominated one essentially, some are styled so on account of their being continuous, as, for instance, a bundle held together by a string, and a piece of wood by glue, and a line even though it be curved, yet if it be continuous is called one. As also each of the parts of the body, for instance a leg and an arm. Now, of these very things, those are more one, which by nature are continuous, than those that are continuous by art. But that is called continuous of which the motion is one essentially, and also which it is not possible should be otherwise. And motion is one when it is indivisible, and indivisible according to time. Those things, however, are essentially continuous, as many as are not one by contact. For if you were to place sticks touching one another, you would not say that these are one, either one piece of wood, or one body, or anything else that is continuous. And indeed, in general, things that are continuous are called one, even though they may have a curve, and still rather things that have not a curve. Thus the leg and thigh are more one than the leg and foot together, because it is possible that the motion of the leg and foot be not one. and the straight line is one rather than the curved line. But the curved, and that which has an angle, we call both one and not one, because it is admissible that both the motion of the whole should not be at the same time, and yet that at the same time should be motion of a part. But part and the whole of a straight line are always at the same time in motion together, and no such portion as involves magnitude partly remains at rest and partly is in motion, as of a line that is curved. Further, in another way, a thing is called one in respect of the subject being in species indifferent or destitute of a difference. But things that are indifferent are those of which the form, according to sense, is indivisible, and the subject is either the first or the last in respect of the end. For both wine is called one and water one, so far forth as either is indivisible according to the form, and all fluids are styled one, as oil, wine, and things that are soluble, because the ultimate subject of all these is the same, for all these are in reality water and air. But those things are styled one also, of which the genus is one, differing by opposite differences. And all these are called one, because one genus is the subject of the differences. For instance, horse, man, dog, is a certain one, because all of them are animals. And doubtless they are one in some similar manner as the matter is one. These things, however, sometimes in this way are styled one, and sometimes the superior genus is regarded one, which is denominated the same, if those higher up than these be the ultimate species of the genus, as, for example, the isosceles to be sure, and the equilateral are one and the same figure, because both are triangles, but they are not the same triangles. Further, are those things styled one, the definition of whatsoever of which, denominating the essence of them, is indivisible as far as regards another definition signifying the being of the thing, for every actual definition is essentially indivisible. For so also both that which has undergone increase and diminution is one, because the definition is one. As in the case of surfaces possessing length and breadth, the definition of the species is one. In general, however, are those things one, of which the perception is indivisible. I mean, that which perceives what the essence or formal principle is, and which cannot be separated either in time or place or definition. These most especially, I say, are one, and of these as many as are substances. For, universally, whatever things do not involve division, so far forth as they have it not, so far are they styled one. For example, if man, as far as he is a man, has not a division, he is one man. And if an animal, as far as it is an animal, is indivisible, animal is one. But if magnitude, as far as magnitude is concerned, is indivisible, magnitude is one. The most things, no doubt, then, are styled one, because some one different thing they either affect, or suffer, or possess, or because of their being relative to some one thing. But those things primarily denominated one are those of which the substance is one. One, however, either in continuity, or species, or definition. For also we reckon as plural, or many, either those things that are not continuous, or those of which the form is not one, or of which the definition is not one. But further is it the case that we say sometimes that anything whatsoever is one, provided only it involves quantity and continuity. And we sometimes say that it is not one if it be not a certain whole, that is, if it does not possess one form. For instance, we would not say that in like manner a shoe is one, when, looking at the portions of that shoe any way whatsoever put together, although there may be continuity involved therein. But if it be in such a position of its parts as to be in reality a shoe, and to have a certain form, it would already then be one. Wherefore also of lines the circular is particularly one, because it is entire and perfect. Of the one, however, the very essence consists in this, that it is the principle of a certain number. For the first measure is the principle of each genus thereof. For that whereby, as primary, we make a thing known, this is the first measure of each genus. Therefore, the first principle of that which may be known constitutes in regard of each genus the one. But the one is not the same in all the genera, for here it is diesis, and there a vowel, or a mute. But of gravity there is a different one, and of motion another. Everywhere, however, is unity indivisible, either in form or in quantity. That, indeed, therefore, which is indivisible according to quantity, and so far forth as it is a quantity, I mean, what is in every direction indivisible, and is without position, this is called an unit or monad. But that which is in every direction indivisible, and involves a position, is a point, and that which is divisible in one direction is a line, and that capable of a twofold division a surface. But that which in every way and in three directions is divisible according to quantity is a body, and conversely, that which is divisible in a twofold respect is a surface, and that in a single direction a line, and that divisible everywhere in three directions is a body, but that divisible nowhere according to quantity a point and a monad, the one without position a monad, and the other with position a point. And moreover, some things are one according to number, but others according to species, and others according to genus, and others according to analogy. Those things are one in number of which the matter is one, but in species of which the definition is one, but in genus of which there is the same figure of predication. But according to analogy are things one as many as are disposed as one thing in relation to another. The subsequent, however, invariably follows the things that are prior, as, for instance, whatsoever things are one in number are also one in species, but whatsoever things are one in species are not all one in number, but all things are one in genus. Whatsoever are likewise so in species, but whatsoever are one in genus are not all one in species, but are so in analogy, and whatsoever things are one analogically are not also in genus. It is manifest, however, also, that plurality will be spoken of in an opposite manner to the one, partly from the fact of its being not continuous, and partly from having its matter divisible according to species, either as the first matter or the ultimate matter, but partly from possessing many of those reasons or definitions which declare the essence of a thing, or its very nature. End of chapter 6 of book 4. Chapter 7. Entity is denominated partly as that which subsists according to accident, and partly that which subsists essentially. An entity subsists according to accident, as when we say that a just man is musical, and that the man is musical, and that the musician is a man, speaking in a similar manner as when we say that the musical man builds because it is an accident to the builder to be a musician, or for the musician to be a builder. For the affirming that this particular thing is that signifies that this thing is an accident in that. So also in the case of the instances that have been mentioned, when we say that the man is a musician, and that the musician is a man, or that one who is white is the musician, or that the latter is white, we say this because both of these are accidents in the same subject. But we say that because they are accidents in entity. But that the musician is a man, we say because the being a musician is an accident to this person. So also is it said that what is white is a man, because that is a man to which the being white is an accident. Things indeed, therefore, said to subsist according to accident are expressed in this way, either because both are inherent in the same entity, or because they are inherent in that entity, or because they are the same with that in which the accidents are inherent, and of which the thing itself is predicated. Entities also are said to subsist essentially whatsoever signify the figures of predication. for as often as they are predicated, so often do they signify essence. Since, therefore, of the things that are predicated, some signify what a thing is, or quiddity, and others quality, and others quantity, and others relation, and others action or passion, and some the place where, and others the time when, to each of these the being or essence signifies the same thing. For there is no difference in the expression, the man is in a healthy state. From this, namely, the man is healthy, or the man is walking, or is cutting, from the expression man walks or cuts. And in like manner also is it in the case of the rest. Further, the words to be and it is signify that a thing is true, but the words not to be that it is not true but false. In like manner is it the case both in respect to affirmation and negation, as, for example, he who says that Socrates is musical says so because this is true, or he who says that Socrates is not white says so because it is true. He, however, who says that the diameter is not incommensurable says so because this is false. Further, to be and being signify that which is expressed partly as potentially, and partly as actually, of those things that have been enumerated. For we say also that seeing is both seeing in potentiality expressly and in actuality. And similarly, we say that he is endued with scientific knowledge who both has the ability to employ scientific knowledge and does actually employ it, and that a thing is in a condition of rest, both in which rest is at present inherent, and which involves the capability of remaining in a state of quiescence. But in like manner also is it in the case of substances. For we speak of the existence of mercury in the stone, and the half of the line, and we call that corn, which not yet has reached a state of maturity. When, however, a thing is potential, and when it is not as yet potential, must be defined elsewhere. Chapter 8. As regards substance, both simple bodies, as for instance earth, and fire, and water, and such like, are called substances, and in general bodies are styled so, and animals consisting of these, and those beings that are of the nature of demons, and the parts of these. Now all these are denominated substances because they are not predicated of a subject, whereas other things are predicated of these. But in another way is that styled substance whatever may be the cause of being, and may be inherent in such as are not predicated of a subject. For example, soul in an animal. Further, as many parts as are inherent in such things that both define and signify the what a certain thing is, on the removal of which the whole is taken away. As, for example, if superficies be taken away, body also is destroyed, as some say. And superficies is destroyed by taking away a line, and in general, number seems to certain to be a thing of this kind. For that, if it is removed away, nothing can subsist, and that it defines all things. Such parts we may consider substances. Further, the essence of which the formal cause is the definition, this also is styled the substance of each thing. Now, substance happens in two ways to be styled substance, both as the ultimate subject which no longer is predicated of anything else, and as that which may be this certain particular thing, and may be separable, but such is the form and the species of each thing. Chapter 9. But the same are styled partly according to accident, as the white and the musical are the same because they are accidents in the same subject, and man and musician are the same because either is an accident in the other. I mean that man is musical because the musical is an accident in man, and this is the same with either, and either of these the same with this. For also with the man that is musical, both man and musical are styled the same, and that is regarded the same with those. Wherefore also all these are not predicated universally, for it is not true to say that every man is the same thing with what is musical. For universals are absolute existences, but accidents are not absolute existences, but are simply predicated of singulars. For it seems the same thing to be Socrates and Socrates the musical, for the expression Socrates is not affirmed of all. Wherefore, not every Socrates is predicated as every man is. And some things in this way are called the same. Some things, however, are called the same essentially in the same way as unity also. For those things likewise of which the matter is one either in species, or in number, or in genus, are called the same, and those of which the substance is one are called the same. Wherefore it is evident that sameness is a certain unity of the being of either many things, or when one employs anything as many, as when one affirms the same thing to be the same with itself, for he employs that thing as two. But diverse are those things called of which either the species are numerous, or the matter, or the definition of the substance, and in general is the diverse denominated in a manner opposite to the same, and those things are styled different whatsoever are diverse. Being, however, in some respect the same, not merely in number, but either in species, or genus, or analogy. Further, things are considered different of which the genus is diverse, and the things that are contrary, and whatsoever involve diversity in the substance. Similar are those things styled, both which everywhere undergo the same affection, and undergo more of the same affections than of the diverse, and of which the quality is one. And in as many of the contraries as a change is possible, that which possesses more of these, or the more important amongst these, is similar to that thing. Things that are dissimilar, however, are denominated in an opposite way to those that are similar. Chapter 10. Things that are opposite are called contradiction, and contraries, and relations, and privation, and habit, and those things from which ultimate things arise, and those into which they are resolved, as, for instance, the generations and corruptions of bodies, and whatsoever things it is not admissible at the same time should be present in that which is receptive of both. These are said to be opposite either themselves, or those whereof they are compounded. For black and white at the same time are not inherent in the same subject. Wherefore, those colours of which they are compounded are opposite to these. Those things are called contraries, both those which cannot be present in the same subject at the same time, of things that differ in genus, and those things are called contraries which involve the greatest amount of difference, of those that are in the same genus, and things that widely differ in the same recipient, and which widely differ of those under the same capacity, and those of which there is the greatest difference, either simply, or according to genus, or according to species. And other things are styled contraries, some as having such things in possession, and others as being recipients of such, and some in being effective, or in being capable of undergoing passive conditions, or in being agents, or being passive, or being rejections, or affinities, or habits, or privations, of these and of things of this sort. Since unity and entity, however, are spoken of in many ways, there is a necessity of the other things also following as many as are expressed according to these. Wherefore also will there be a distribution of the same, and the diverse and the contrary, so that there must needs be something diverse in each category. And diverse in species are those things called as many as being of the same genus are not subalternate, and as many as being in the same genus involve a difference, and as many as in the substance are related in the way of contrariety. And contraries are diverse in the species of one another, either all or those which are denominated primarily, and are those of whatever in the ultimate species of the genus the definitions are diverse, as for instance man and horse, which are individuals in the genus, but the definitions of them are diverse, and those are contraries as many as being in the same substance involve a difference. Those things, however, are in species the same which are expressed in an opposite way to these. Chapter 11. Prior and subsequent are things called. Some, as in the case of a certain thing existing as first, and as a first principle in each genus. For prior is that which is nearer a certain first principle, defined either simply and by nature, or relatively, or according to place, or by certain things. As, for instance, some things are prior in place from the fact of being nearer either by nature to a certain definite place, as to the mean or the extreme, or by some ordinary relation in this way, and that which is more remote from this definite locality is subsequent. Other things, prior and subsequent, however, are so in accordance with time. For some things indeed are considered prior as they are more remote from the present moment, for instance, in the case of things that have taken place in time past. For the Trojan annals are prior to the Median, because they are further removed from the present time, and other things are prior in regard of being nearer the present time, as in the case of things to come. For the Nemean games are prior to the Pythian, because it is an event nearer the present, using the present as a first principle and a thing that is first. Some things also according to motion are prior and subsequent, for that which is more immediate to the first moving power is prior, as for example a boy is prior to a man, and this also is a certain first principle simply considered. Some things also are prior according to potentiality, for that which is supereminent in potentiality is prior, and that which is more potential is prior. But that nature is of such a kind as according to the free will of which another must needs follow, which is also posterior. Wherefore, in the event of that one not imparting motion, the consequence will be that no motion should ensue in the other, and in the event of that one imparting motion, that motion should ensue in the other, but free will constitutes a first principle. Also, things according to order are styled prior and subsequent, but these are such as according to some one relation defined are distant proportionally, as for example, in a dance the person standing second is prior to one that stands third, and the paraneat to the neat, in a musical instrument, for in the former is the person who presides, and in the latter the medium is a first principle. These things indeed, therefore, are styled prior in this way, but in another way is a thing prior in knowledge, as if it were even absolutely prior. Of these things, however, that are otherwise, some are according to reason, and some according to sense. For certainly, according to reason, things that are universal are prior, but according to sense, the singulars are prior, and according to the reason also, the accident is prior to the whole, as the musical is before a man that is musical. For the entire reason will not be without the part, although it is not possible to be musical when there is not a certain one that is musically gifted. Further, the passive conditions of things that are prior are called prior, as for instance, straightness is prior to smoothness, for the one is an essential affection of a line, and the other of a superficies. Some things, therefore, are called prior and subsequent in this way, but others are termed so according to nature and substance, as many as it is admissible can be in subsistence without others, but others cannot subsist without them, which opinion Plato adopted. But since the being is in many ways denominated, in the first place the subject is prior, through which the substance is prior. In the next place, the things according to potentiality and actuality are otherwise. For according to potentiality are some things prior, and others according to actuality subsequent. As for instance, according to potentiality is the half prior to the whole, and the part to the whole, and the matter to the substance. But according to actuality is this a thing that is subsequent. For when dissolution has taken place, things will subsist according to actuality, In a certain manner, it is true, all things that are styled prior and subsequent are expressed according to these. For some according to generation, it is admissible, may subsist without others, as the whole without the parts, but some according to corruption, as the part is prior to the whole. But it is in like manner with the rest. Chapter 12. Potentiality is called the first principle of motion or change in another thing, or so far forth as it is another thing, as the building art is a potentiality that does not reside in the thing that is built. But the art of healing, when it constitutes a potentiality, would reside in the person who is being healed, but not so far forth as he is a person that is being healed. Therefore, in general, the first principle of change, or of motion, is said to be potentiality in another thing, so far forth as it is another, and potentiality is styled such from another thing, or so far forth as it is another, for according to this sense of potentiality is what is passive in any degree passive. Sometimes, then, if it may be possible also that anything whatsoever undergoes passion, we say that thing involves the potentiality of being passive, but sometimes we say that this is not the case as regards every passion, but if it be passive in reference to what is better. Further, is potentiality the capacity of accomplishing this particular thing well, or doing so according to free will? For sometimes persons who merely have been walking or speaking, but yet who have not done so well, or not as they would choose, we would not say possessed the power or potentiality of speaking or walking, but also in like manner is it in the case of passion. Further, as many habits as according to which things are entirely devoid of passion, or unchangeable, or not capable of being easily altered into a worse state, such are styled potentialities, for things are broken indeed, and rubbed together, and bent, and are in general subject to decay, not from the having capacity, but from the not having capacity, or potentiality, and from deficiency in some point. Other things, however, are impassive by such as scarcely, and in a small degree, become affected on account of potentiality, and the possession of potentiality, and the being in a certain manner disposed. Now, seeing that potentiality is denominated in so many ways, in the first place will also the potential be styled as that which possesses a first principle of motion, or of change. For even what is stationary is something potential in another thing, or so far forth as it is another. And in the second place, if anything else of this should possess a capacity of this sort. And in the third place, if it involves such a capacity of bringing about a change in anything whatsoever, whether into what is worse or into what is better. For also, that which is in a state of decay seems to be a thing capable of falling into decay, otherwise it would not be corrupted if such were impossible, but already has it a certain disposition of parts, and a cause and first principle of such a passive condition. Sometimes, however, from the fact of possession, and sometimes from the fact of privation, does it seem to be a thing of this sort. And if privation in a manner constitute a habit, all things by the fact of the possession of something would be potentialities, but the entity would be also expressed equivocally. Wherefore is a thing potential in respect of having a certain habit, and first principle, and in respect of involving the privation of this, if it is admissible that it should involve privation. And in the fourth place is a thing potential from the non-possession of a potentiality, or a first principle of this in another, or so far forth as it is another, which is subject to corruption. But, moreover, are all those things potential, either in the mere accident of their being generated, or not being generated, or in respect of their being generated in an excellent manner. For also in things that are inanimate is there such a capacity inherent, as for instance in musical instruments. For one lyre, they say, can send forth sound, but that another does not possess this capacity, if it be not fair sounding. Impotentiality, however, is a privation of potentiality, and a certain removal of a first principle of such a sort as has been mentioned, either entirely so, or from being by nature adapted to have such, or already to have such when it has been naturally fitted thereto also. For we would not say that in like manner was it impotential or impossible for a man and an eunuch to beget a child. But, moreover, according to both sorts of potentiality is their impotentiality opposed both to that merely which is capable of motion, and to that capable of motion in an excellent manner. And things are styled impotential, some in accordance with this kind of impotentiality, and others in another way, as, for instance, both the possible and the impossible. That, indeed, is a thing impossible, the contrary of which is necessarily true, as the commensurability of the diameter is a thing that is impossible, because such a position in mathematics is false. And the contrary of this is not only true, but also must necessarily be so, namely the incommensurability of the diameter. Its being commensurable, accordingly, is not merely false, but must be false. The contrary, however, to this is the possible, when it is not necessary that the contrary should be false, as, for example, the possibility of a man sitting. For not necessarily is his being in a posture not of sitting a thing that is false. The possible, in one way, therefore, as has been stated, signifies that which is not necessarily false, but in another it signifies the being true, and in another that which it is admissible may be true. Now, this is what, in geometry, is figuratively styled potentiality. These indeed, therefore, are things possible, not so according to potentiality. But all the things that are expressed according to potentiality are enumerated with reference to one original potentiality or capacity, and this is a principle of change in another, so far forth as it is another. For the rest are styled potential, partly in some other of them possessing such potentiality, and partly in its non-possession thereof, and partly in its being thus disposed. In like manner also is it the case with things that are impotential, wherefore the precise definition of the first potentiality would be a principle capable of bringing about a change in another thing, or so far forth as it is another. Chapter 13. Quantity is denominated that which is divisible into things that are inherent, of which either or each thing is adapted by nature to be a certain one thing, and a certain particular thing of this sort. Multitude, then, indeed, is a certain quantity, if it may be numerable, but magnitude, if it may be measurable. And multitude is styled that which is divisible in capacity into what is not continuous, but magnitude into that which is continuous. Now, of magnitude, that which is continuous in one direction is length, and that in two directions, breadth, and that in three, depth. But of these, finite multitude is number, and length is a line, and breadth a superficies, and depth a body. Moreover, some things are said to be certain quantities in themselves, or to be essential quantities, but others quantities according to accident, as a line, to wit, is a certain essential quantity, whereas what is musical is a quantity according to accident. Now, of quantities that are so essentially, some are a certain quantity according to substance, as, for instance, a line. For in the definition expressive of what anything is, a certain quantity is inherent. But other quantities are passions and habits of such a substance, as, for example, much and little, and long and short, and broad and narrow, and high and low, and heavy and light, and the rest of such properties. Likewise, both the great and the little, and the greater and the less, expressed both in reference to themselves and in relation to one another, are the essential passions of quantity. These names, indeed, are also transferred to other things. Of quantities, however, that are expressed according to accident, some are so expressed as has been declared, because what is musical is quantity, and what is white is so in respect of there being a certain quantity in that subject wherein they are inherent, and other things are quantities as motion and duration, for these also are termed certain quantities, and things continuous in respect of those things being divisible, of which these are passive states. Now, I mean not that which is in a state of motion, but that which has had motion imparted to it. For from the fact of that being quantity, motion is likewise quantity, and duration, from the fact of this latter being quantity, is regarded as quantity itself also. Chapter 14. Quality is styled in one way the difference of substance, as man is a certain quality of animal because he is a biped, and horse is a certain quality of animal because he is a quadruped, and a circle is a certain quality of figure because it is without angles, so that the difference constitutes the quality according to the substance. Now in this one way is quality styled the difference of substance, but in another as things incapable of motion and mathematical entities, just as numbers are certain qualities. For example, those that are compound, and not only those which subsist in respect of one, but those of which surface and solid are an imitation. Now these are plane, square, or cube numbers, and in general, whatever besides quantity inheres in substance. For the being assumed once is the substance of each thing, as, for example, the substance of the 6 is not twice 3, or thrice 2, but the being taken once, for once 6 is 6. Moreover, as many things as are passive conditions of substances in a state of motion are called qualities, as heat and cold, and whiteness and blackness, and gravity and lightness, and whatever such like properties there are, according to which the bodies of those things that are undergoing a change are said to be altered. Further are things qualities so far as they subsist according to virtue and vice, and in general to what is bad and good, so that almost in two ways may quality be expressed, and in one of these, which would be the most strict or appropriate. For first, indeed, as quality is the difference of substance, and a certain part of this also is the quality contained in numbers, for this is a certain difference of substances, yet either not of things that are being moved, or not so far forth as they are being moved. These, however, are passive conditions of things that are in motion, so far forth as they are being moved, and are differences of motions. And virtue and vice are a certain portion of such passions, for they make manifest the differences of motion and of energy, in accordance with which those things that are in motion are agents, and are passive in an excellent or a worthless manner. For that which in this way possesses the power of motion, or of energizing, in this way is good, and that which is moved and energizes in that way, and in a contrary manner is worthless. And most especially do what is good and bad signify quality in the case of animated natures, and amongst these particularly does this apply to the case of those that possess free will. Chapter 15. With respect to relatives, they are denominated some of them as a twofold to a half, and a threefold to a third, and in general a multiple to a submultiple, and excess to that which is exceeded, and others of them as the calorific to that which is heated, and the divisible to the divided, and in general the active to the passive, and others of them as the measurable to the measure, and the object of scientific knowledge to science, and the sensible to sense. Now, regarding these relatives, the first of them are expressed according to number, either simply or by definition, in respect of them or in respect of one, as, for example, the twofold in respect of one is a definite number, and the multiple is according to number in respect of one, but such as is not defined, as, for example, this or this particular number. But the sesquialiter in relation to the subsesquialiter is according to number in relation to a definite number. Superpartient in relation to superpartient is according to the indefinite in the same manner as the multiple is in relation to one. but that which exceeds, in relation to that which is exceeded, is in short indefinite according to number. For number is commensurable, but the excess and what is exceeded are denominated according to a non-commensurable number. For that which exceeds is such in relation to that which is exceeded, and something further than this. But this is indefinite, for whatsoever chances to be the result is either equal or not equal. These things, therefore, which are relatives, are all denominated according to number, and are passive properties of numbers. And further, the equal and similar and same, according to another manner, are termed thus. For all these are expressed according to the one. For the same indeed are those things of which the substance is one, but similar are those things of which the quality is one, and equal are those of which the quantity is one. And the one is the first principle and measure of number, so that all these are denominated relations according to number indeed, yet not in the same manner. Things active and passive, however, subsist according to an active and passive potentiality, and according to energies that belong to potentialities, as that capable of promoting heat to that which is heated, because of its being endued with potentiality, and again the making warm in relation to that which is made warm, and one who severs in relation to that which is severed, as things energizing are relatives. But of those things that are relatives according to number, these are not energies, save only in the manner it has been mentioned elsewhere. But energies according to motion do not subsist in numbers. And of those things that are relatives according to potentiality, some are already styled so according to periods of duration, as, for example, that which forms in relation to that which has been formed, and that which is likely to form in relation to that which is likely to be formed. For so also is a father called a father of a son, for there is something that partly has been active and partly passive. Further are some things considered relations according to the privation of potentiality. For instance, just as the impossible, and as many things as are expressed in this way, as, for example, the invisible. Things, therefore, denominated relatives according to number and potentiality are all of them so called because each derives that which it is from reference to another, but not because something else is denominated with reference to it. And the measurable, and that which may be scientifically known, and that which is an object of the intellect, on account of something else being denominated in respect of them, are styled relatives. For also, being an object of the intellect signifies that the intellect is exercised about this. The intellect, however, does not subsist in relation to that about which the intellect is conversant, for the same thing doubtless would be said twice. In like manner also, the power of sight is that of something, and not of him to whom the sight belongs. This, however, is a true statement, but it is in relation to colour, or something else of this kind. Yet in that way the same thing would be expressed twice. I mean that sight is the sight of him of whom it is the sight. Things indeed, therefore, called relatives essentially, are denominated partly in this way, and partly if their genera are of this kind. As, for instance, the art of healing belongs to those things that are relative, because the science which is the genus of it seems to belong to those that are relatives. We may subjoin as such those things according to which, whatever they may be, things that possess them are spoken of as relatives. For example, equality is a relation because of the equal being relative, and similarity is a relation because of the similar being relative. Some things, however, are called relatives according to accident, as man is a relative because it is accidental to him his being twofold, and this belongs to those things that are relatives. Or the white is a relative if it is accidental to the same thing to be twofold and white. End of chapter 15 of book 4. Chapter 16. Perfect is denominated that beyond which it is not possible to assume anything or any one single portion, as, for instance, the time of each thing is perfect, beyond which it is not possible to assume any period of duration which is a portion of this time, and that which, according to virtue, and to what belongs to the excellent, doth not involve excess with respect to any genus, as, for instance, a perfect or finished physician, and a perfect or finished musician, are such when they are in no wise deficient as far as regards the species of the excellence that is proper to their professions. So also, transferring our remarks to the case of evil things, we say a perfect or finished sycophant and a finished thief, since we also denominate these characters good, as a good thief and a good sycophant. And virtue is a certain perfection, for each thing is then perfect, and every substance is then perfect, when, in accordance with the species of its proper excellence or virtue, no portion of the natural magnitude is deficient. Further, in whatever things resides an admirable end, these are styled perfect, for in respect of involving an end are they perfect. Wherefore, since the end is something belonging to extremes, and transferring also our remarks to the case of things that are worthless, we say that a thing is perfectly lost and perfectly corrupted when not of the corruption and of what is bad is deficient, but when it has arrived at the ultimate limit of these. Wherefore also death metaphorically is called the termination, because both are extremes. The end, however, together with the final cause, is a thing that is ultimate. The things indeed, therefore, denominated essentially perfect, are styled in thus much number of ways, partly in their being no wise deficient according to subsisting in an excellent manner, nor involving excess in each genus, nor there being anything extrinsic belonging to them, and the other things now are termed essentially perfect in respect either of the doing some such thing, or the having it in possession, or of the adaptation of itself to this, or in accordance at least with some other mode of expression in relation to things that are primarily called perfect. Chapter 17. A termination is called the last of each thing, and beyond which, as first, it is not possible to assume anything, and within which, as first, are comprised all things, and that likewise which may be a form of magnitude, or of that which is in possession of magnitude, and which is the end of everything. Now, a thing of this kind is that towards which motion and the mode of an action tend, and not from which they originate. Sometimes, however, a termination is both of these, both that from which motion and action originate, and towards which they tend. Also, that for the sake of which other things operate, and the substance of each thing, and the essence or the formal cause of each. For this is a termination of knowledge, and if of knowledge, also of the thing done. Wherefore it is evident that even as often as the first principle is predicated, so often also is the termination, and still more multifariously. For the first principle, to be sure, is a certain termination. Not every termination, however, is a first principle. Chapter 18. Quote, the according to which, close quote, is denominated in many ways. In one way, indeed, as the species and the substance of each thing, as, for instance, that in accordance with which a man is good itself is good, and in another way, as that in which first a thing has been fitted by nature to rise into being, as colour in a superficies. Therefore, what has indeed in the first instance been mentioned as, quote, the according to which, close quote, constitutes form, but that mentioned secondarily as such is as the matter of each thing, and the first subject in everything. And in general, quote, the according to which, close quote, will have a subsistence as often as the cause. For according to what a man has come is an expression of the same import as on account of what he has come, And the inquiry according to what false reasoning or correct reasoning may be drawn is the same as an inquiry into what is the cause of the syllogism or the paralogism in such cases. Moreover, the according to which is denominated that which subsists according to a position according to which one stands, or according to which one walks, for all these signify position and locality. Wherefore, that according to itself, or the essential, is necessarily expressed in many ways. For in one way is, that according to itself, or the essential, the very nature of each thing, or the formal cause, as, for example, Callias essentially is the very nature also of Callias. And secondly, it signifies whatsoever things are inherent in the what anything is, as Callias essentially is an animal. For in the definition of Callias is to be found animal, for Callias is a certain description of animal. And thirdly, may we denominate that according to itself, or the essential, as a thing that has primarily been a recipient in itself, or a certain part of things that belong to itself, as, for instance, superficies is essentially white, and man essentially is an animal. For the soul is a certain portion of the man in which vitality is primarily inherent. Fourthly, does it signify that of which there is not any other cause? For of man there are many causes, such as animal, biped, but nevertheless man is man essentially. Fifthly, we consider that according to itself, or the essential, as many things as are inherent in some one particular thing alone, and as far forth as it is alone. Wherefore, whatever has a separate has also an essential subsistence. Chapter 19. Disposition is styled an arrangement of that which has parts, either according to place or to potentiality, or according to species, for it is necessary that there be a certain position, as also the name disposition makes manifest. Chapter 20. Now habit is denominated in one way as a certain energy of the possessor and the possessed, just as it were a certain action or motion. For when the one accomplishes and the other is accomplished, the act of accomplishing is a mean between them. So also between one having in possession a garment and the garment had in possession, habit is a mean. Therefore, indeed, is it evident that it is not admissible that this should involve another habit. For the thing would go on to infinity if it be the case that one habit should involve the habit of that which is possessed. And in another way is habit styled a disposition according to which that which is disposed well or ill, and this either according to itself, that is, essentially, or in relation to another, as, for example, health is a certain habit, for it is a disposition of this sort. Further, is a thing called habit in a case where it may be a portion of such a disposition. Wherefore also is the virtue or excellency of the parts a certain habit. Chapter 21. Passion is denominated in one way, quality according to which a thing admits of alteration, as white and black, and sweet and bitter, and gravity and lightness, and whatsoever other such things there are. And in another way now are energies and alterations called passions of these. Still more than these are noxious alterations and motions, passions, and particularly those motions that along with being noxious or injurious are painful likewise. Further, the crushing burdens of misfortunes and of things that are fraught with suffering are called passions. Chapter 22. Privation is denominated in one way in case a thing does not involve any of the things that by nature are adapted for being possessed, even though itself may not by nature be adapted for the possession of such. As, for example, a plant in this sense is said to be deprived of eyes, And in another way is that termed privation if a thing be by nature fit for possession of a thing, either itself or the genus, and yet may not have possession of that thing, as in one sense is a blind man deprived of sight, and a mole in another, the latter indeed according to the genus, and the former according to itself or essentially. Further is that privation if a thing be by nature adapted to possess a quality, and when it is so adapted by nature to possess it, yet possesses it not. For blindness is a certain privation, but for an animal to be blind is not in accordance with every age, but with that only in which it is fitted by nature to have sight, and yet may not have it at all. And in like manner may privation be found in the what, and according to what, and for what, and so far forth as it may be adapted by nature for the possession of such, and yet may not possess them. Further, the violent removal of each thing is styled a privation, and as often also as are expressed negations from A, so often likewise are expressed privations. For the unequal is denominated thus from the fact of the non-possession of equality when by nature it is fitted for it, but the invisible both from being entirely without colour and in consequence of having it defectively. And an animal is called apos, or without feet, both from its being without feet entirely, and in consequence of having them attended with some defect. Further, do we call a thing privation when that thing has anything small, as, for instance, any fruit with a small kernel, and this amounts to the being in a manner disposed defectively. And again, we say privation exists where a thing cannot be effected with facility, or in a proper manner, as, for example, that which cannot be severed is so not only in respect of the incapacity of being severed, but also in respect of the incapacity of being severed easily or properly. Moreover, privation is found in the non-possession of a thing in every way. For a person blind is not called such from being one-eyed, but from being deprived of the power of vision in both eyes. Wherefore, not every man is good or evil, or just or unjust, but also there are shades of character intermediate between these. Chapter 23. Possession is denominated in many ways. In one way as the action of a thing according to the nature of that thing, or according to the impulse of it. Wherefore, both a fever is said to possess a man, and tyrants are said to possess states, and those that are clothed a garment. And in another way, we term possession as that in whatever anything is inherent, as being receptive, as, for instance, the brass possesses the form of a statue, and the body possesses disease. And in another way, we term possession as a thing that embraces the things that are comprised, for wherein anything is comprised, by this it is said to be possessed. As, for instance, we say that the vessel possesses moisture, and the city inhabitants, and the ship sailors, and so also the whole possesses the parts. And further, that which hinders, in accordance with its own force, anything from motion or action, is said to possess this very thing, as, for example, both the pillars possess the superincumbent weights, and just as the poets make Atlas to possess the heaven, so that it should otherwise fall upon the earth, as also certain of the physiologists affirm. And in this way, likewise, is the connecting said to possess the things which it connects, as if they would otherwise have severally been separated according to their own proper force. And the being in anything is expressed in a similar manner with, and as a consequence upon possession. Chapter 24. The being from anything, is said in one way to be that from which a thing is, as from matter, and this in a twofold respect, either according to the first genus, or according to the last species, as, for instance, all liquids, in a way, are from water, and the statue is from brass, And in another way, we consider, quote, the being from anything, close quote, as that which springs from the first moving cause. Thus, from what doth the battle arise? From invective, because such is a first principle of the battle. In another sense, however, is this defined as that from what is composite, I mean from matter and form, as the parts from the whole, and the verse from the Iliad, and the stones from the house. For form is an end to be sure, but that which possesses an end is finished. And in some respects it is as the species from a part. For instance, man is from biped, and a syllable from a letter, for these are from those otherwise than the statue from the brass. For from the matter cognizant to the senses is the composite substance, but also form consists from the matter of the form. Some things are styled in this way, as, quote, that from anything, close quote, and others if they subsist according to any part of these modes, as from the father and mother the child, and from earth the plants, because they spring from some part of them. And lastly is this styled as that which subsists after anything in time, as night is said to be from day, and a storm from a calm, because the one follows after the other. But of these, some are so called in respect of possessing the power of mutual change, as also those particulars just now enumerated, but others only in respect of their being successive in time, as from the equinox is made a voyage, because it is made after the equinox, and the Thargelia are from the Dionysia, because they are celebrated after the Dionysia. Chapter 25. A part is said to be in one way that into which any quantity whatsoever may be divisible, for always that which is subtracted from quantity, so far forth as it is quantity, is called a portion of that thing. Thus of three is the two in a manner called a part, and in another way that which measures it is called the part of things of this sort merely. Wherefore 2 in one way is a part of 3, as is stated, and in another is not so. Moreover, those things into which the species of animal may be divided, without quantity, these also are called parts of this species. Wherefore they say that species are parts of the genus. We further call those things parts into whatsoever anything is divided, or those things whereof the whole is made up, or the species, or that which involves the species, even as the brass is a part of the brazen sphere, or of the brazen cube. But this is the matter wherein the form resides, and an angle also is a part. Moreover, those things that are contained in the definition which manifests each thing, these also are parts of the whole. Wherefore the genus is called a part also of the species, and in other respects the species is regarded a part of the genus. Chapter 26. A whole is styled first that from which is absent no part of those things whereof the whole by nature is said to consist, and secondly that which contains the things contained, so that they form one certain thing. And this is the case in a twofold way, for it is so either in such a manner that each may be one, or that one thing may arise from these. For the universal indeed, and that which is predicated in general as being a certain whole, are universal in such a way as that the predication of each contains many things, and that all are one, as each predicated thing is. For example, man, horse, God, is individually one thing, because all are animals. And the continuous and the finite may we regard as a whole when there may be produced one thing from many things that are inherent, especially when this is the case in potentiality, but if not in energy. Now, of these very things, rather are those wholes which subsist by nature than such as are made by art, as also we say in regard of the one, that entirety is a certain unity. Further, seeing that quantity has a first principle and a mean and an extreme, of whatsoever quantity's position does not cause a difference, all is predicated, but of whatsoever it does, a whole is predicated, and as many things as admit of both whole and all are predicated. There are those things, however, whose nature abides the same in the act of transposition, but not so with the form, as wax and a garment. For both whole and all are they styled, for they possess both. But water, and whatsoever things are moist, and number are called all, no doubt. Yet number is not styled a whole, and water a whole, unless metaphorically. All those, however, are predicated thus, of which the entire is predicated, as in the case of the one. In the case of these, I say all things are predicated, as in the case of things divided, we say all this is number, and all these monads. Chapter 27. But the mutilated is styled amongst quantities, not every indiscriminate quantity, but it must needs be itself divisible and a whole. For two things are not mutilated when either one is being subtracted. For both the mutilation and what remains nowhere are equal, nor in general is any number mutilated, for also must its substance needs remain. Thus, if a goblet be mutilated, still must the goblet exist. But a number is no longer the same when a part is taken away. And in addition to these, if also things may be of dissimilar parts, neither can all these be considered mutilated. For number is that which also contains dissimilar parts, as for example a duad, a triad. But in short, none of those things of which the position does not make a difference is mutilated, as water or fire, but such must needs be mutilated which have a substantial position. Further, things continuous must needs be mutilated, for harmony consisting from things of dissimilar parts indeed also possesses position, but it does not become mutilated. And in addition to these, neither are those things mutilated whatsoever are wholes by the privation of any part whatsoever indifferently. For it is not necessary that either the principal parts of the substance, or those that are taken away anywhere whatsoever, should make what remains mutilated. As, for instance, if a goblet be bored, it is not mutilated, but if its handle, or if any of its extremities be, it is mutilated. And a man is not mutilated if he have flesh or spleen, but if he have an extremity taken away, and not every such indifferently, but should it be that which does not possess the power of reproduction when entirely taken away. Wherefore, bald persons are not mutilated. Chapter 28. Genus is styled so partly when there may be a continuous generation of things that possess the same species. As, for instance, there is said to be a genus of men, because as long as the generation of them may be continuous, there would exist such. And it is that also from which things derive their being, as the first disposing cause towards existence. For so are the Hellenes styled the genus, and the Ionians, the former as springing from Helen, and the latter from Ion, as the first generator. And rather are those things a genus that are from the generator than from the matter, for they are said to be the genus also that are from the female, as those from Pyrrha. Further are they termed as the surface is called the genus of superficial figures, and the solid of such as are solid. For as regards each of the figures, the one is such a surface, but the other is such a solid, and this is the subject in the differences, which of course is the genus. Further, do we regard genus as that which first is inherent in definitions, which is predicated in the case of the essence of a thing, the differences of which are called qualities. The genus, therefore, indeed is denominated in thus many ways, partly according to the continuous generation of the same species, and partly according to the original moving power of the same species, and partly as matter, for that to which the difference and the quality belong, this constitutes the subject which we style matter. And things are called diverse in genus of which the first subject is diverse, and in the case of which one is not resolved into another, nor both into the same, as the form and the matter are something different in the genus, and whatsoever things are denominated according to a different form of the predication of entity. For some entities signify quiddity, and some a certain quality of a thing, and some have a signification in accordance with our former division. For neither are these resolvable either into one another or into any one thing. Chapter 29. The false is denominated in one way as a false thing, and in regard of this, partly in the fact of its not being composed, or in the impossibility of its being in a state of composition, as the expression of the diameter being commensurable, or of your being in a sitting posture. For of these the former is indeed always, but the latter sometimes false. For thus are these not in being. For things are false as many as are in being, no doubt, but yet are fitted by nature to appear either not such as they are, or what they are not, as, for example, a rough painting and dreams. For these truly are something, but not those things of which they cause an imagination or impression. Things indeed, therefore, are thus termed false, either in respect of themselves not being, or in respect of the impression that is conveyed from them being that of a nonentity, and a false discourse is a discourse about nonentities, so far forth as it is false. Wherefore, every false definition or discourse is employed about something that is different from that of which it would be a true discourse, as the discourse about a circle is a false one when transferred to a triangle. Now, the discourse or definition of everything is partly as one, namely, that explanatory of the essence, and it is partly as many, since somehow a thing itself, and this thing, viewed as passive, may be regarded the same as Socrates, and Socrates the musical. And a false discourse is a discourse simply about nothing. Wherefore Antisthenes entertained a silly opinion when he thought that nothing could be predicated, unless one, in regard of one thing, by a proper definition or discourse. The result of which statements was, that there can be no contradiction in existence, and almost no way of making a false assertion. It is possible, however, to express each thing not only in a discourse proper to itself, but also in that which belongs to a different thing, falsely no doubt, and altogether so. Notwithstanding, then, is it possible to express the same in a manner also with truth, as for instance 8 are twofold from the definition of the duad. Some things indeed, therefore, are denominated in this way false. But a false man is called one who is ready and disposed to admit false assertions of such a sort, not on account of anything that is different, but on account of their being false, and who, in the case of others, is the cause of the adoption of such false assertions, as also we say that those things are false as many as create a false impression. Wherefore, the reasoning in the Hippias of Plato is sophistical, so far as it endeavours to establish that the same man is false and true. For one that is capable of deceiving he receives as false, and this person is one that is knowing and prudent. Further, a man who is voluntarily worthless he pronounced a better man. Now, this falsehood he gathers by induction. For one that is lame voluntarily is superior to one that is so involuntarily, considering the voluntary lameness as an imitation of lameness. Since, if were he lame voluntarily, he would, perhaps, be a worse individual, as this also would be the case as regards moral deportment. Chapter 30. An accident, however, is denominated as that which is inherent in something, and which it is true to affirm is so, yet not either necessarily or for the most part, as, for example, if any one in digging a furrow for a plant should discover a treasure. This, then, would be an accident to the person engaged in digging the trench, namely, the discovery of the treasure, for neither does the one necessarily follow from the other, nor after it, nor, should one be occupied in planting, does he, for the most part, find a treasure. And the case is the same should any one who is musical be white, since, however, this takes place neither of necessity, nor as, for the most part, we pronounce this an accident. Wherefore, since there is something which has a subsistence, and a subsistence in something, and some of these both in a certain place and at a certain time, whatsoever would be so indeed, but would involve no illusion as to why it was this particular thing, either now or here, such will be an accident. Nor, doubtless, is there any definite cause of what is accidental, but the cause of this is the casual or ordinary, and this is the indefinite. Thus, it has been accidental to a certain individual his arriving at Aegina, if he has not left home for this purpose, that he should go thither, but has been driven there by a storm, or captured by pirates. The accidental, doubtless, has been generated, and will have a subsistence, not, however, so far forth as itself is concerned, but as far as something else is. For the storm was the cause of his going to the port he was not sailing for, and this was Aegina. And in another way is a thing called an accident. For example, in the way whatsoever things are inherent in each thing essentially, and yet are not contained in the substance of that thing, as in a triangle to have angles equal to two right angles. And accidents of this sort, it is admissible, should be eternal, yet this is not the case with any of those others. The reason, however, of this may be found elsewhere. End of chapter 30 and end of book 4.